Welcome everyone to our next edition of CFO Club. We are very privileged to have Mr. Manas Datta, CFO Wockhardt Limited, with us today. Mr. Datta, welcome to Dun& Bradstreet CFO Club.
Thank you very much. It's my privilege.
I would start the first question I would start the first question with do you wanted to be a financial professional throughout your life? How did you came there? So, we would have an icebreaker question before we start.
Technically speaking, I never wanted to be a finance professional in my life. I never had any kind of understanding what is finance till I was doing my graduation level. Nobody from my family is into finance profession. It's just a coincidence that I came into this, but trust me, for last 30 years, ever since I'm in the industry, probably I liked it every moment of it. And in case if I again come back in this world sometime in my so-called next life, and given a profession to choose, probably I will choose it again. And I'm not exaggerating it. It's sincerely my expression of the kind of love, adulation, recognition the profession has given. Other than that, probably the another profession I would have loved is to be into medicine, because that's also quite close to my heart. My father wanted me to be a doctor, but I never been. But that also could have been a good profession to handle it.
Oh, wonderful. Medicine and finance, and now you're in the right field, right? You're in one of the largest pharma companies, so that's excellent. So your 30 years of experience, I think, what you've seen in the last 5 months is very different from the last 30 years that, you've seen in your profession. What has been the learnings?
Well, let me tell you that it's not today what we are seeing for the last 5 6 months in this world is not a financial trouble or financial debacle. It's a debacle or probably a historic debacle or challenge for the human race. It's nothing to do with finance, right? Our so-called existence in the world in this universe came into a halt, right? So I will never ever try to frame it as a financial trouble or I from a finance guy. I will never ever try to do that. Interesting part is that first is positive. Everybody talked about this issues of COVID-19 as a very negative, I will say very pessimistic way of looking into the things. I will not do that. We will talk about it. Those are challenges. But optimistically, if you really sincerely look at, last 5 months gave us three different dimensions. First and foremost, we realized how weak, how insignificant we are. So start from the beginning, right? Everything became and completely null and void. It was de novo. So we started doing everything from the scratch. So it was very interesting. Everything was. Point number two, we realized that we can do many things which we never ever thought. Even on a progression of human race in the digital environment, which everybody talked about last 5 6 years. I have been speaking in various forums that digital, digital, and digital. I think we adopted digital in a fraction of a second in few weeks after the lockdown took place, right? So we realized that a newer kind of a work atmosphere, life atmosphere, home atmosphere, the way we live has undergone a change and we could adopt it. It was the fastest ever. I think the adoption that human race must have seen. If you look at the Lamarck's theory of evolution, if you look at Darwinian theory of the survival of the fittest, we proved again to the world that as a human race we can do it. This is the point number two. And point number three is that probably every religion of ours, every philosophy of ours taught us to be humble, to be magnanimous, to be acceptance, right? And start respecting others. I think this environment forced us to start respecting others, both at home as well as outside. As a human being, we became humble. We knew that money has no value. We knew that none of the things which is across me here, all these paraphernalia of the houses have no meaning to us. It's only a fraction of a moment. So these three are very positive to me. Uh, while on the other side, if you are talking about what are the challenges, I think I will elaborate it over a period of time. But to start with this conversation, Naina, I sincerely believe that it has a dramatic event, change event for the human race.
You are in the healthcare as well as pharma industry, and you guys had to respond to it much faster than any other industry because people were looking forward, for some answer to the healthcare and pharma. So, how you guys have managed to manage your priority settings, and what was those things, and the first initial few months. So, if you could just share some experience from there.
Well, so there are two different parts to it. Point number one is, of course, there is a question of the healthcare, which came faster than the pharma, because healthcare was a need of that hour. Uh, I must say that the entire healthcare fraternity, whether it is a doctor, whether it is nurses, whether it is the healthcare support functions, the paramedics, even the police on the street and on the field, actually did an unprecedented work. There is no doubt about it. We never had to tell anybody what to be done, though each one of us in the healthcare facility didn't know what to do. Technically, there are no SOPs available globally for such kind of a pandemic. We all talk about epidemic. We all talked about natural disaster. We talked about explosions, natural calamities all around us. But a pandemic, which is an unseen and unknown enemy, you really didn't know what to do. Even if you have seen that the majority of the regulators, including WHO, World Health Organization, was little not very sure what needs to be done. So in this particular case, we face challenges. Number one is that there are patients coming into the hospital, and the hospital has already an existing patient as well as a COVID patient. So it is a very big challenge to maintain. Number two, the healthcare functionaries, including doctors and all other support staff, were also under a threat. Their life was under threat. Your PPEs were not available at the very beginning. So it was a challenge what to do. But my understanding in India, the majority of the healthcare facilities, including us, actually coped it up well in the initial 2 to 3 weeks' time. We didn't face any trouble thereafter. In terms of the pharma, the biggest challenge was how to run the plant. Healthcare is a facility, it is an infrastructure, one building, two buildings together. But a manufacturing facility is not only one building, one areas, right? And there are many stages of manufacturing. So how to do it, when to do it, and bringing people from both the worker levels to the supervisors level to the managerial person to the manufacturing facility was a challenge. And some of the places where we were, like but the Aurangabad, it was a lockdown zone or containment zone. So initial 2 to 3 weeks up to probably the second week of April, we had trouble in terms of manufacturing. Supply chain was completely stopped. Right. So, but 15th of April onwards, I think majorly came back. The knee-jerk reaction went. Uh, and then let me be very clear, I'm apolitical in this, but a country with 3,000 kilometers from north to south and west to east, a supply chain is not an easy job to handle. So it's not. We are not European Union that in 200 kilometers or 300 kilometers it's something else, right? So it was a challenge, but it was quite nicely taken up by everybody on the street, and we could manage it well. First 15 days, I think, till 15th of April, it was tough.
As a CFO, so you know that there was supply chain, there was issues with supply chain, there was issues with overseas supplies. There were so many challenges. So as a CFO, how did you prioritize your so how did you prioritize your work and where you should be focusing on?
You see, of course, it is not only as a CFO; it is also as a part of the management. And it is I'm not the only person. I have my colleagues who are all doing together. We stood up together. You know, I will, since you asked me as a CFO, so I will restrict myself that question to as a CFO. In the organization, what we did is that we created 3 R's. R for river. 3 R. So the 3 R, first R is respond. Respond to the situation, right? We didn't know what to do. So respond to the situation as it evolves. Number two is that resolve the situation. Whatever you can do, you start resolving the situation. So that means in terms of working capital, in terms of liquidity, in terms of making sure the processes are on, in terms of making sure that all your supply chain backend is working well. So that is the resolution. And number three is, in terms of making sure the third R, which we call it as restore, at least in finance, we did it as restoration, going back to the glory. Now, going back to the glory is still yet to come. And when we are doing this resolution and the restoration, these two R's, I as a CFO could see that two major events. One, the banking fraternity came back onto the street. Right, they went back to offices, which was unprecedented. So the banking infrastructure started working. Even if it was in a reduced scale of operation, but it started. The regulators like RBI get a lot of guidance, a lot of support, which again I will say to be very, very apolitical, that this was extremely right time step, which has helped us in resolution, which has helped us in doing the restoration. So three things in this three are making sure you respond to the situation, be agile. All our teams started working from home. Everybody started working from home. The connectivities both in SAP, means the ERP platform that we use, were seamless. So IT guys did an outstanding job. So making sure that we restore everything back into the situation. And when we restore back into the situation, the resolution came a little longer. But three things I told you, that we wanted to do a quick working capital and liquidity management. Number two, a seamless process of all the payments, all the collections processes that we need to do. And number three is all the compliances that were needed to be done during this period, even if it was extended by the authorities. Quite nicely done. But we try to do not to get that benefit of extended period of compliances in terms of banking, in terms of secretarial practices, in terms of taxation, GST, many other global areas. And what I'm talking here, Nana, is not India. We are in 21 countries, right? We are in as big as economy like in US, where we have our infrastructure, means our R&D facility, our distribution facility, our manufacturing facility. So is with Ireland, UK, Dubai, right, and many other places all across the globe. We did it.
I also wanted to understand that supply chain is a very very big thing in pharma industry, right? So how did you manage the supply chain risk element? Because you have so many vendors, so many service providers that you had to work. The pandemic has hit people in different ways. So how did you manage to renegotiate, figuring out if the suppliers that you're depending on, that they are in the right shape to be able to meet your commitments? How did you do that risk assessment?
See, in the pharma, if you look at an Indian context first, right? Uh, the pharma industry was well distributed industry. It's not an industry which is concentrated to few. I'm not naming which are those industries which are concentrated to few. We have 10,000 manufacturing facilities in this country, both from SMEs, MSMEs, to the middle segment, to the corporates like us. I think the initial 2 3 weeks were tough, but by end of April, I think everybody came back to, unless otherwise his manufacturing and distribution places are under the containment zone, but which was not the case. Some cases. Number two, that Indian subcontinent, the supply chain is quite well distributed, like I told you, in terms of the sourcing, and very well, I will say, nurtured and systematically developed over the period in terms of its distribution capacity. Right. So I think both from the sourcing side, API, sourcing side of the formulated products, our own manufacturing and distribution, I really don't think it was a big trouble after April or end of April. When it comes to internationally, the exports were initially halted, but the globally, if you see like US, UK, Ireland, European Union, and many other places, the dispatches takes place for 60 days inventory, 90 days inventory. So it was not something which you have an immediate knee-jerk reaction. but we lost some cases the time period of the supply chain. That did happen.
Okay, so there's a huge shift in Indian healthcare and pharma industry. Some from where we were exporting, looking at the world, we could even meet our own requirement to something that we are now. The world is looking at us because we are in the foreign runner and making the vaccine, and we are importing medicines. So we are exporting. Sorry, we are exporting medicines. We've really come to that level. So what has been your views that what made that change?
Well, India was doing. You talked about vaccine. Let me talk about vaccine because that's the need of the day, right? More than 50% of the world vaccine was being supplied by India, right? It's not today. It was happening earlier also. The data says more than 50%. Some data says more than 60% of the vaccination sources are ours. Now, so it's not that the India has started doing something which is just now post COVID. It was always there, and hopefully it will continue. Uh, Coming back to also the vaccination for COVID, if you look at that, some of the global companies they are in the process of inventing and clinical trial, doing various stages of clinical trial for the vaccine for COVID. Right? We also signed an agreement with Astra and UK government for COVID-19 vaccination, right? Which is very very coveted because NHS in UK has signed it with us, which is very very coveted. So vaccine, my understanding, if you really look at today, the world has about 7 billion people, right? And if you need a two dosage form of vaccination in a year of COVID, and we try to cover uh, entire population of the world, which is 7 billion, you need about 14, 15 billion, dosage form in a year. Coincidentally, my UK facility can manufacture 400 million. My Indian facility can manufacture about 600 million. So dosage form. So it is actually a 1 billion dosage form that we can do. I'm not saying that we are doing. We can do, right? In case getting an option, we will be able to. So on 14 billion, 1 billion is almost 7-8% of the global capacity we only have. There are plenty more manufacturers. Uh, so India will be continuing to be the one of the hub of manufacturing the vaccination, inclusive of COVID, and also for the other vaccination. And I'm very, very positive that Indian pharmaceutical industry will grow significantly leaps and bounds. Uh, there is nothing to be happy about it. We were doing it. We will. And one last point in this particular thing is that the API may be an issue of sorts. Government has come up with a newer API guidelines, but you know, 15, 20 years back, India was one of the largest manufacturer of it. We outsourced it to China, right? And we became dependent on China on the API. But let also be very, very clear that rather than manufacturing the API, the formulation manufacturing was a value add, right? Rather than a bulk drug, when you manufacture the final product, you add value. Not only value in terms of the chain of operation, but the value of the country, because you export at a higher value material, both foreign exchange, global arena. You are completely open. My feel we should continue doing that, but whereas there are no trouble of getting into re-looking into our API manufacturing skills.
I will just go back to a little bit of how we started in the digital trade. You said that adoption was so quickly, people move digital so quickly. So in your professionalism, I mean, are you using a lot of digital transformation, and what all the things that you guys have embraced, apart from obviously working from home and infrastructures, etc. But is there anything particular which is helping the financial profession and in your in your collection, in your maintaining working capital, liquidity?
Sure. Naina, I think before we get into the digital and be very, very once again, getting into a finance, I would like to sincerely, it is an unsolicited point from my side. You have not asked me
Please.
this question, but I would like to speak upon. You know, at the very beginning, when you asked me what did COVID teachers and what did it. One point I told that I will speak about it a little later because it was needed to be into a flow of discussion. One part of the COVID which we probably need to really look at from its scientific part as well as from the collaborative, right? Which we as a professional, whether from finance or from non-finance, doesn't really matter. All right. As a professional, we have to think through. Give you a smallest example. This COVID outbreak actually told us that while the while the global, the scientific development in last 30 years could predict a tsunami, could predict probably a hurricane, could predict natural calamities to a reasonable, high level of certainty. Today, our scientific, processes actually unable to predict a global pandemic.
Correct.
So globally, the science, microbiology, chemical science, right, engineering, and digital need to collaborate together to really look at like we do and forecasting for the weather. Is there a possible pandemic, epidemic outbreak at the various places we can do? Big data, digital, AI, ML can really help us. We need to do. I think there is a lot of collaboration is needed both by the government and private. Right? We need a lot of money to pump in. None of the meteorological department is private. You know that. These are all government. Nobody invests. But in case of science, when it comes to the biology, when it comes to life science, we say private participation is needed. But it's not. We need to really look at how we developed our atmospheric or space research, which is mostly driven by the government. We need to do that, right? With the participation. We have to create a facility like NASA to do an epidemic pandemic research focus.
Correct.
Number, number two is that I think our global clinical trial processes are probably little outdated. My medical fraternity and scientific fraternity may not like it, but probably it's little dated. We, for the last 50 years, we have created a clinical research trend. It depends on certain procedures on human trial at the various levels, right? And that takes between 7 years to 15 years for a clinical trial. But today, this pandemic tells us that you cannot wait for 15 years or 7 years or 5 years to do a clinical trial and come into vaccination. It's not possible. So what else? Your question. Actually, I took this opportunity when you talk about digital, right? This is where we need to do. Like the way the space research, like the way the meteorological department look at the big data and gives it to the all end user, whether it is airlines, whether it is the shipping industry, to use that environment data, atmospheric data for their own purposes. I think we need to get into a big data or kind of an machine learning, kind of an artificial intelligence to do an algorithmic processes of clinical trial, which will be more close to a human trial, and then probably use it for the human trial for the restricted period and come with a faster outcome. I think we need to do that. Again, it needs both government and private. Coming back to your question, I hope uh, you understand why I
Yes, yes, of course.
un- unsolicited part of mine to your question. Coming back to the finance profession and the digital, it's not new. I think all of us have been talking about the digital transformation of finance for the last several years. Uh, well, I think going forward, one thing is very clear that we may not be going to office anymore on regular basis. Right now, you are at home, I am at home, we are still working. So probably we will not be going back to office soon. So does it necessarily mean that the digital transformation needs to be done in a little different manner? My understanding is yes. So rather than only RPA, rather than only a simpler form of robotics processors, simpler form of doing scanning, processing, those will be those will be the process which anybody will adopt and people are adopting.
Correct.
But I think it will be much more distributed process of digital adoption, which will be like how even I, as a CFO, will adopt the digital process into my life while managing my. One is dashboarding, making things digital, dashboarding, evaluating, and doing. My feel is that it will go beyond. Uh, I may be talking about little sci-fi on this, but people will sincerely uh, do things differently with the digital adoption. And one of the digital adoption which will probably have to really think through is that particularly for our all the women professionals and people who are working for them because they have a bigger challenge today. Like you talked about kids in the at home, right, or the other paraphernalia of work related areas which unfortunately was wasted upon to the women rather than the men. Though I feel that the men could also do that well, but those management will also be part of our digital migration, right? So it will be very holistic digital migration rather than only by migration to a digital world only for a finance. Give you an example. I talked about only the processing of the backend can go into an RPA, but doing the work onto a digital collaboration will also come. And I'm not talking of the Microsoft team or a Zoom. How I collaborate working together and make sure that I do a say global presentation on the road, right? I'm just saying it's not only a process, right? And making sure that my entire chain of compliances are also digitally, which probably we are not there, and going forward it will happen.
Mr. Datta, like CFOs obviously like yourself is not restricted to the finance function anymore, and the way you have the full knowledge about the business, somebody is making boardroom decisions. CFO is a profession that everybody is looking for all kind of decisions. Somebody is a go-to person for every business now, and like the eyes and ears of the business. So, what would be your suggestion and advice for aspiring finance professional who are aspiring to become the finance leader? So you have any suggestion, any things, advice that you would like to give it to them?
You see, really unfortunate part of the CFOs are that uh, unlike engineers or unlike doctors, right? CFO's performance actually changed dramatically and also gradually. An engineer came out as an engineer and started working into a technology field, which he's supposed to, right? A doctor comes out of the college and starts operating or doing whatever he needs to do. But the CFO's role for last, I think, about 15 odd years has dramatically changed,
Correct.
which are not only because of the digital or because of the only compliances or because of the change in environment, right? But also, I think over a period of time, business leaders started understanding that the CFOs are the only person or only professional in the company who has a 360 or topmost information of everything that is happening.
Correct.
Initially, it used to be called as Muninji, right? Because Muninji used to keep a data entry, right? So, kharcha kitna hua hai? Go to Muninji. But from the Muninji, we started doing its accounts closing, consolidation, and making sure that the investors and the end usage of the data started. Then came the compliance, and compliance. Then we realized that after doing everything, this fellow coincidentally has become the core owner or the possessor, I will not say owner, of all the information of the organization, whether it is from supply chain, operation, HR, distribution, manufacturing, everything. So go to this. But still, I'm very unhappy, and that unhappiness, I will put it in this CFO forum for sure, is that I'm yet to come across an industry or a company where finance function is still not considered as beyond support. Finance is still a support. It is very unfortunate. It's the mindset, and that mindset Nobody can change unless otherwise the CFOs can change, either themselves and go and tell. So I have a suggestion from a volumetric zone to a value zone migration is very important to the CFOs. And for that, about a year back, I coined a new word. This is my patented word, right? That the CFOs should, rather than working as a strategic partner to the business, strategic partner to the management, start working as, you know, uh, kind of, I will say, a corporate, value guardian, right? Who can partner to be kind of a guardian of the value creation in the organization, right? And start working on, not making only the information, making the path of the information, whereby all the three segments, internal consumer of the data, right, which is used for the decision making, to the statutory and the external environment of that data, make sure that they understand, and clubbing them together, you become a guardian, a value guardian to the organization, whereby you can create that value in the market, in the environment, in the society, in the investors, in the everybody who is there. So that migration needs to, and none other than CFO can do that. So this will be called as an economic guardian rather than a value partnering, rather than a strategic partnering. And sometimes people say you should be a business partner. I always thought, why I should be a business partner? I really fail to understand why I should be a business partner, right? Uh, I should be an economic guardian. I should be a strategic partner rather than only the value business partner. Business is a process. Let us not forget, business is a process. If I can manufacture something, I can sell it something. But where to go? That value addition can be done other than the CEO, of course, will be most ideal by the CFO. And I'm not surprised that the people are going back to the CFOs and finance professionals there. But still, the support function call, believe me, after 30 years of my experience, I am pained that I could not do much for this. I'm still told in every forum I go, finance is a support.
No, I
It's,
think
it's a,
things are changing. Things are changing. Finance no longer is a support function. After the CEO, everybody looks after the CFOs. And I really like this word, economic guardian. So really thank you for the new word and thank you
it's,
so much.
it's my patented.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for today, Mr. Datta. It was really a pleasure interacting with you, and I'm sure our viewers will have similar experience. And it's a very insightful interview. Thank you so much. We look forward to coming back to our viewers with another edition very soon. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for watching.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.